My name is Oladele Ayorinde, and I'm happy to welcome you to this special edition of the Organelles Concert and Seminar Series at Mountaintop University. For some of you who, of course, many of the colleagues and friends are they're a component of this community, and we appreciate you for always creating that moment and that time to to strengthen what we do and to support and to always being there for us at all time. And for those who are joining us for the first time, I'm happy to welcome you to the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series. The Organ House Concert and Seminar Series is a space of musical engagement. By that, I mean it's a space where we explore music within all its social, aesthetic, creative, performative, and cultural, contexts. By that, I'm talking about music experimentation, composition, artistic discourse, or even performances, concerts, as well as many ways in which we engage music in society, and many ways in which music helps us to explore the society, not only as as an identity, as a cultural phenomenon, but also as political, economical, and religious, within its religious context also. So we have series of projects going on at the Organ House, many of which I will discuss towards the end of this particular, towards the end of our conversation today. But let's get into the business of today for a while. I'm sure many people are still going to join us. And in the process, I will always remind you for the newcomers what we do and what, the context and what we stand for on this platform. Once again, thank you, everyone. I'm so happy to see you today. I'm so excited also to, to welcome all of you back, and especially our speaker of today, which in the person of Professor Geoff Mapaya. For many of us on this platform, Professor Mapaya is actually, we can call him a household name, in the sense that he has been part of what we can call the struggle within the context of Africa, post-colonial African musicology. Professor Mapaya is one of the standing voice, to use that word, in the African, on the continent, who embrace the African-centered approach to music studies. He's a pedagogue, and I'm so happy to welcome him today. Professor Mapaya, it's so great to have you today. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm very glad to be here.
Yes. So for those, I think it's also good for me to introduce Prof within the context of of his work and his creative work, his artistic work, his scholarly work, many of which belong to the creative, artistic education, and also within the cultural policy on the continent. So Professor Madimabe Mapaya is a distinguished academic with notable career in musicology, education, cultural leadership, and community engagement. His scholarly work is centered on the study and promotion of African music and culture, with a particular emphasis on the South African context, while maintaining a global perspective. Professor Mapaya holds a PhD in African Studies from the University of Venda, a Master of Music degree from the University of the Witwatersrand, a higher diploma in education, and a Bachelor of Music degree from the University of Cape Town. This comprehensive academic background has facilitated his significant contributions to the field of musicology. His doctoral research focused on indigenous music, specifically examining its practice among the Bahanawa people in Limpopo province, employing Afrocentric and new musicological methodologies. His master's research explored the contemporary transmission of Northern Soto culture through music. Throughout his career, Professor Mapaya has occupied numerous leadership roles. He has served as the head of the music department at the University of Venda, as the head of the Jazz and Contemporary Music section. Additionally, he has chaired the Limpopo Art and Culture Council. These positions highlight his capacity to lead and influence arts and culture initiatives. Professor Mapaya is a prolific researcher and author with extensive array of publication in the DHET, that is Department of Higher Education, accredited journals, international peer-reviewed journals, books, and book chapters. His research spans a diverse range of topics, including African musicology, indigenous music, cultural heritage, music education, and the intersection of music with social and political issues. Notably, he has conducted significant research on the music traditions of the African indigenous churches. Beyond his research and teaching, Professor Mapaya is actively engaged in creative work. He has released several recordings showcasing his talent as a musician and producer. These creative endeavors complement his academic pursuits, adding a practical and artistic dimension to his scholarly work. Professor Mapaya has supervised numerous master's and doctoral students, contributing to the development of the next generation of scholars in musicology and related fields. His supervision encompasses diverse topics, reflecting his broad expertise and commitment to fostering intellectual inquiry. He has participated in numerous conferences presenting his research and engaging with other scholars in his field. His conference presentations covered a wide range of discourse as well as topics, demonstrating his intellectual curiosity and commitment to advancing knowledge. As a panelist, he has shared his expertise on significant issues facing the music industry and education. Professor Mapaya has been involved in various fundraising activities for the art and culture sector, securing substantial funding for numerous projects. These efforts demonstrate his entrepreneurial spirit and commitment to supporting the arts. In sum, Professor Mapaya is respected and influential figure in musicology, education, and cultural leadership. His contribution to research, teaching, community engagement, and institutional development have had a lasting impact on the South African arts and cultural landscape and beyond. I am happy, once again, to welcome Professor Mapaya to this platform. Professor Mapaya, I think I'm going to hand over the baton to you. Please, you have the platform.
Thank you, Doctor. And once again, thank you for such a humbling introduction. As you rightly stated, my interest is in African musicology. And I know I am speaking to the converted. Disciplines now are problem-solving tools at our disposal. So I want us to start from that premise that African musicology should be seen as a problem-solving strategy, not only a music problem. It could solve so many other problems. We'll come back to those. But first, I would like to pay homage to scholars who came before me, certainly who came before us. We start with Professor Nketia Convener, and then there are two guiding lights in musicology that I've had the privilege of interacting with. One is Professor Mekin Zewi. I'm forever indebted to him. And second is Professor Agau, who, when we were discussing some few years back, I thought he was such a prolific scholar, and I stood no chance. And then he, as you know him, very humble, gentle giant, he said, "No, what you're talking is rubbish. Talk to me after 20 years. Let's see where you would be." I'm not sure whether I would ever reach his heights, but at least I'm still in the field. And there are many other scholars from West Africa. I think collectively, I would like to pay homage to them because had it not been for them, I don't think this concept of African musicology would even see the light of day. Let me also pay homage to the scholars who are coming now. Dr. Ayorinde, your age group thereabout, because I think you are giving us a new lease on life. The kind of subject you're researching are mind-bending for some of us, but we are enjoying the ride, and thank you so much. I see we've got a few colleagues in attendance. I hope some of them are students, and thank you for coming. Now, let me start from the beginning. We said that we must see scholarship as a problem-solving agent. So African musicology needs to be problem-solving. Now, let's go to the beginning. We all know that music education started in the church from the singing or the chants, or singing of the chants, until we had composers such as Bach, who were in service of the church actually. Then there was a need to reproduce that kind of caliber of musicians. So the only way that could be done was for us to have a system where we can introduce newer, younger, talented musicians to the techniques that are already in display in those esteemed composers and music performers such as Mozart and Haydn. But then we were still in service of the church. Perhaps that also assisted in structuring this thing into an academic discipline. Because as you know, the concept of university and so on takes its root from the church. Now, that is another way of seeing the need to start studying music. Now, let's come to the African side of things. You are aware that in Africa, there's no deliberate intention to teach people music. It is generally accepted that people are born musicians, and certain families are designated the position of providing music for the community. Now, in that case, there is no need for a formalized structure because already there are families endowed to perform the task. Now, the concept of us now wanting to study African music is fairly new. I think Professor Agau points to a conference that took place in South Africa in 1947 as the start of formal focus on the study. Some other reasons, let's say for sociological or anthropological reasons. The colonialists who came here, one very important way for them to study how African societies were structured was to get into the music and try and understand how the music is structured. So, my personal journey, I guess I was born into a musical family. When I opened my eyes, I already had guitars hanging around. Then there was a need for me to study. I wanted to do chemical engineering. At some point, I couldn't get funding, so I sank into some depression. And then the only thing that assisted me was playing music. I'm a guitar player. So I started playing music. Then one fateful day, then I felt maybe this could be something that I could study. Then as I was walking around Johannesburg, I heard people singing. Then I went to inquire. Oh, I hear there are people singing. I found out that that was a school. It was called Federated Union of Black Arts. Then I went in there. I was told, okay, now here we study music. What do you want? They said, no, I think I want to join. They said, join today. Start attending classes. Then I started. Lo and behold, this was the institution that was to produce a host of South African premier artists, film stars, musicians, visual artists. But at the end of my 3-year study, I was advised that I have a mind, an academic mind. I don't know what that is. So I should proceed to study at some university. And then I was walking around Wits University going to the library. I had an acoustic guitar with me. It was a nylon string guitar, but because I couldn't afford to buy the nylon strings, I just put in steel strings. Then I met an old man who was just walking by on campus. I think it was Saturday. The campus was deserted. And then he said to me, young man, what are you holding in your hand? I said, I have a guitar. I said, can you play it? I said, maybe. Then we sat down and I played him Fernando Saw's piece of music. And he said to me, I am Professor Bond. I said, oh, Professor Bond. Oh, okay. Geoff. And then he says, what do you do here? I said, no, I was going to the library. I wanted to see if I can find some books for you. He says, no. You've got a space. You can come and study music at the University of Cape Town. I did not believe what he was saying. Said, okay, I've got a space. I should come to Cape Town, yes. All right. I went home, told my parents, then they said, okay, that's fine, you can go. But my father was very ecstatic because he never thought one could study music at the university. That's how I got into university. But then in the university, it was in that prime time where jazz was taking root, jazz education. I think we were the first lot at the University of Cape Town to enroll to study specifically jazz. There was jazz also at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. and jazz at Tshwane University of Technology. I think those were about the three institutions that were offering jazz. Then that's when I encountered a different mindset of music, because in classical music, we were trained to play from the score strictly. There was no space for your own personal expressions. But in jazz, we were encouraged to bring all our musical sensitivity into class so that we can have a voice of our own. I thought that was liberating. But it was after reading a Miles Davis book, autobiography, that I think for me, I decided that no, right, this thing, I think I need to study it further. That's when I started doing a higher diploma in education. Then I started the journey of teaching. So that's where my music background started. Now, I am a jazz-trained African musicologist. I'm lucky because in South Africa, we still have the so-called Afro jazz or African jazz or township jazz, which is spearheaded by the likes of Abdullah Ibrahim or Dollar Brand those days. Themba Mkhize, the gentleman who's on the poster at the back of, he played a lot with Miriam Makeba. Yes, then it gave me the opportunity to now see music differently. Now I have a jazz background, I can play funk, fusion, and all that. But then I needed a content that would have made me different. So part of that content was the language I speak and the culture from which I come. So that is why I play the kind of music I do today and teach from a philosophical perspective that I espouse today. Now, from my early encounter, I realized that there was something amiss in music education, because from Fuba Academy, which was an NGO, there was so much vibe, there was so much spirit, there was so much push, so much drive, which is why so many of artists and musicians who were in that school and like similar schools, there were other schools in other areas, but that particular environment was so conducive to efficient learning. And then in hindsight now, when I looked at it, there was an advanced method of teaching. Teachers were not as prolific or as hip or as current as the students, but it was the manner in which students from different parts of South Africa came together and started sharing their own experiences. And then that for me opened my ear and said, oh, okay, music is stringing together different influences so that you can at least be able to find some expression in it. But that understanding would not hold in a classical music class, where your only source of inspiration would have to be dictated to by your teacher. And it would have to be in a textbook somewhere. Otherwise, you play that or there's nothing in between. So that's where I started questioning the study of music. As we all know, the study of music became what we call ethnomusicology. I'm not going to go back to when it was comparative musicology, but it became ethnomusicology. Now, ethnomusicology was not the product of African musicians. It was not even the product of African scholars. It was a product of scholars of Africa, or Africanists, want to call them, people who have a particular interest in Africa. So they happen to be musically trained, so they were able to deal with musical objects. But then the agency is different. They are going in there to study music. Then the question is, in doing so, what problem were they seeking to solve? And during my many years of study, I couldn't find a problem that was solving. I only found it to be an academic exercise that happened for its own sake. I want to understand what Yoruba music is. There I'll go there. I study for me to understand, write, and publish. And unfortunately, that's what most of us do. We go into these fields in pursuit of a qualification, not necessarily conscious of what we do and why we're doing it. So I started taking an opposite view when it comes to the notion of ethnomusicology. And then I looked at how people who did ethnomusicology or who applied ethnomusicology behave. They are paradoxical scholars in the main. They go into the field for two years. I think 2 years was the average. Then they come and write books, and then they never set foot in the place where they did research ever after their field work. So you would be lucky if one still mills around and finds the place interesting. But there are obviously exceptions to that assertion. You've got a friend of mine, Professor David Copeland, who's invested in African music. He studied African music, but eventually he became African because the music could not let him go. So what happens is we need to define this. What is it? And then in defining it, we need to start by asking, what problem does it solve? Because if it's not solving any problem, maybe we might as well look elsewhere. In South Africa, you have an established music education discipline, because you've got many big universities already teaching music. So traditionally, obviously, it would be Western music, classical music. And then it was only later in the 80s that the notion of African music was brought. And again, their only source has been the writings of those anthropologists and early scholars, meaning that the methodology is not going to solve the village problem. That's the reason why even today we don't have a structured music curriculum in schools, simply because our discipline was not designed to solve any of those kind of problems. It was just a self-saving exercise to say, hey, you know what? I've been to Africa. I know a little bit of this and that about Africa. But unfortunately, these people held some position, and then we entered the system as students, and we were supposed to be supervised in that kind of an environment. Then we African scholars bought into ethnomusicology because for us, going into the university was a way of acquiring a qualification so that we get employment elsewhere. So still, it solved my problem, but it does not solve the bigger problem. Now the time has come for the African musicologists to stand up and solve the African problem through their musicological lenses. So I think that is the call that I'm making, to say we cannot expend any more energy following a facade, something that we don't know where it leads. We need to start redefine what African musicology is, and then how can we deploy it so that it can start solving the African problem. This is the reason why I gave homage to people who came before us. And I think they had an idea that if they were to study music, African music, from a perspective of an African, maybe we'll be closer to where the problem is, which is in African villages and African communities. Now, for us to be fit for that purpose, we need to disabuse ourselves from the things that we've learned. The terminology that we espouse so dearly, perhaps we need to start interrogating those. Yes, I think we must disabuse ourselves from the kind of terminology that we learn from school. If we need to come up with new terminology, we must make sure that it is our terminology. It captures what we find in the villages, and it resonates with what is in the village. Let me give you a few examples. We all know that in African communities, music is not compartmentalized. It's a song, there's dance, there's theater, there's drama, storytelling. Now, if we impose the term music, we are dimming the concept. We are making the concept not speak what the people are actually saying, right? So I've taken it upon myself that I'm going to go by the term that is suggested by the people I'm investigating or I'm researching amongst. For instance, in Sehanan, or the community where I worked on, their concept of rhythm is that it is more re-tato. And then it semotically, when you study, you can hear that the word itself gives an indication of some rhythmic pattern. So, and there's so many other terminologies that give a hint. For instance, another word that I found these people, Bahanan, are using to refer to, I wouldn't even say it's a call and response, rather a statement and an agreement or a support. They don't see it as a call or a support. When you explain the concept of call and response, they say, no, but that's not what we're doing. What happens is that as this lead singer, I would have a communal issue to express. I could say, hey, the flights to Nigeria are taking too long. Now, the people in my ensemble are not going to say, they are going to support me. They are going to say, hey, they are taking too long, or they are taking too long, and each and everyone would come at their own point. But the essence is to support what I am saying, which is why you cannot then come and say, I said it. So it is the collective that would have said it, because I may have introduced the idea, but the collective agreed and supported. So that is a philosophical difference between a call and response, because a call and a response suggests that the caller has some power and the respondent is supposed to oblige by responding. But then if you put it the way they explain it, they are saying this person is saying something that needs our support, then they support. It so happens that as they support, they provide counter melodies which are not contrived, but those counter melodies are placed according to their own tonal sensitivities or sensibilities, rather, which is why you see a lot of parallel movements. But people are not married to the third, or I'm going to start on the fifth, or so. They can start from whatever point. So that is another way that says if we study music from that particular angle, there are so many things that we are going to learn that we have missed, or we are missing when we approach it from a ethnomusical point of view. In one instance, I went to visit a traditional lap harp player who had passed on. When I got to his homestead, I found that his lap harp was put underneath the bed, locked in a trunk tin. Before they touched it, they had to perform a ritual. And then they unlocked the thing, and then they had to ask permission for them to allow me to touch the instrument. So that is the spiritual element that should go into our understanding of how Africa functions. And then if we were to go as ethnomusicologists, we would have missed that. There are so many philosophical benefits that we can derive just by being relevant and looking at our own upbringing as some kind of an indicator as to where the solutions might come from. And in another spiritual healing music, all these properties of medicines and healing, they are there in the music. But because we are not trained to listen to what they say, or even decode things that are not said but expressed in either dance, we are not able to connect with Africa. So really, we need African musicology. In talking to Professor Kidula and Professor Wanyama, we're thinking maybe we should be deliberate and say, let's go and do African musicology from within. Because if we do African musicology from within, we are able to learn so many other things that are not on the surface, but that makes the music what it is. We did a little bit of an experiment. The question was, what is this thing? When you say African music, what are you talking about? And then the question was, no, we are not talking traditional music or what people call traditional music. We are talking music made by an African. Then the question was, okay, then what is that? What genre is that? We said, no, it could be any other genre. Because if you look at gospel, you would think it's a mixture of jazz and whatnot. But if you look at how the spirit manifests in gospel, you definitely be able to tell that, oh, this is an African thing. You can even listen to Davido's music. And someone even went to the extreme and said, if I were to wake my great-great-grandfather and let him listen to the Amapiano, they would be able to latch on something in that music that is spiritual, and then that is African. So we are not going to be alive to that reality if we don't really invest in defining what this African musicology is. And I know we want to be creative. Some of us want to be credited for having started some kind of a concept or a terminology. I think we are not at that level yet. I think we should rather invest time in trying to think as Africans and then bring to the table these things that are beyond reach if we were to follow any other methodology. So I think that's my provocation. The colleagues and you, Chair, you can then decide if you want me to argue a particular point, but I think there's a note. Yes,
Thanks so much, Prof. Yeah. I think, first of all, thank you so much for this insightful presentation and the ways in which you lay down this conversation is quite, for me, is great because you brought us into it from your own perspective. Of course, we should expect more than that, from a professor like you. As I know, as mentioned earlier, you've been part of those who have been conversing, negotiating, advancing discourse on African-centered education and musicology. And so thanks so much for bringing us into that conversation again, perhaps in a more nuanced way, because you also provided not only the context, but show us the values, potential values that this kind of approach, could garner and ways in which they are valuable to everyday life on the continent. But of course, I'm going to open the platform for our friends, and I'm very sure our colleagues and friends, professors, doctors, they have questions, definitely. But before then, I have two questions to ask you.
Okay.
Perhaps that can help us open the conversation. Yeah. But before that, I have two quick announcements to make before we enter into the conversation. The first one is, I'm sure many of us are joining this platform for the first time. I am happy to welcome you. My name is Oladele Ayorinde. This is the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series. It's a weekly event. What we do, we engage discourse like this, not only talking about music. We play music. We organize symposium, we organize concert, event, public-facing works, archival work, documentation. We engage issues around music and religion, music in diaspora music, music in the local context, jazz, hip-hop, African art music, whatever you call it, we explore on this platform. So you are actually on the right place, on the right spot. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. This time last week, we were discussing classical music in Nigeria. And today, we have gone to South Africa, taking our clue from Professor Mapaya, taking us into the African essence of music, or music essence in Africa. So you are welcome. So we have a platform which I want to invite you. All the recordings we have on this platform, all the recordings of the seminars, they are not just recordings. We also have what we call the experimental documentation. So we have a YouTube page where we have documented all the series, not only for us, but for your own use, because this project is also a documentation and archival project. Why? Because the voice of the likes of Professor Mapaya, we still want to hear it in the next 20 years, 30 years. Our new generation to come, we want to keep the document for them. We are having issue today, not only because people have not done work in Africa, it's because we don't have a viable documentation process. It's very hard for us to go back to in time because there is no platform to see. So what we are doing is twofold: to curate conversation, using the conversation also to document important voices, perspective, and important conversation that is germane to our everyday life. In doing so, we have our documentation platform, which I am dropping on the chat now. So you can follow us on that page. Our YouTube page is for documentation. Anytime, 24/7, the materials are open access for you to also use for your research, for your business, for your whatever you want to do. The materials are there for you. So please, apart from engaging here, I'm inviting you to this platform. Kindly go there, make use of the material there for you. We are documenting it because we know you will need it today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years time. So we are happy to take this role in renegotiating music studies in Africa. So please join us in that process. Follow us and let us know what if you have any need for any particular materials in our archive. We will be happy to supply you more details and more information and resources. That is one. Number two, I am specially inviting you to our first international symposium on African art music, Professor Mapaya has explore the value, of African music on the continent. One of the ways we are pushing this agenda to localize music studies is also to look into the creation on the continent. And in doing this, we are inviting you between 16 and 18th of July. Please join this conversation. We are happy to welcome Professor Kofi Agawu here at Mountaintop University at the Organ House, and Professor Olabode Omojola. They are going to lead this conversation. Please join us in making history. We are so happy, and we also welcome presentations. Please, you've seen our posters around, or you can reach out. Well, we are happy to welcome you, not just to come and view, come and present. What have you been doing? What are you doing? What do you want the world to know about African music? Yes, we have important voices that can also contribute and help all of us advance this conversation. So please send in your contribution. Now, this is not just an academic meeting. It's also a creative and artistic meeting. If you are a composer, if you are a pianist, we want to hear from you. If you are into festival organization, we want to hear from you. If you are a composer, a choir master, whatever you do that has to do with scholarly work, creative work, come and give us a lecture reciter on your own work, on your own composition. If you are into instrumental building, come and tell us about it. This is what this garden is about. It is opening. We are opening a new layer of conversation, bringing it to the community and opening it to those who need the value. So please join us. Thank you so much. So I am happy to come back to Professor Mapaya's important, presentation today. So first, my first question is this, Professor Mapaya. As you know, of course, many of us are quite aware, we are so much aware of the important work that has been done in South Africa, particularly. Of course, I'm not talking about the apartheid narrative. I'm talking about the important work, the ways in which South African Music Academy has championed what I can call, a valuable process in African music. And I'm going to give you an example now. So my question is, you said African musicology needs to solve problem. Yes, I agree with you. But the question for me is that, isn't the foundation of the discipline on the continent, the foundations of works like those of Hugh Tracy, Andrew Tracy, and what eventually became ILAM, International Library of African Music, are these foundations not part of the problem solving? Today, we still have this material. And also, in the last 20 years, of course, that stopped between 1999 and 2006. They started what they call the Ethnomusicology Symposium, where they brought many people together. And even before that, as of between 1950s, 1940s, and 1970s, they had yearly gathering of important voices on the continent coming to Johannesburg to discuss issues on African music. There are many great Nigerian scholars and choir masters who were part of that conversation, including Fela Showande, T.K.E. Phillips, and of course, Nzewe eventually went to South Africa. So, but these people created this space. Isn't that what you're talking about in terms of value? Or are you talking about another forms of value?
Yes, you're quite right. I think they realized a need. These pioneering musicians, they realized a need. A need was that we are studying musicology is busy studying Western classics. And the question is, what is happening when it comes to African music? So that is a problem. So for us to solve that problem, perhaps let's start a discipline and then use that discipline to go and inaugurate or start a formalized entity which would call a discipline to start studying African music formally at university. But then things have moved. The question is, if you start this at a university, what then? Then the question is, then you must refine it such that it solves real problems, right? I'm saying we cannot throw that away because that is the foundation, as you put it, for what we do today. I'm sure we would agree that if you have a son, you would want your son to have a little bit of your own room, your own handling. But then you should allow them to outgrow you and be something else different from yourself. So we've learned from our predecessors. They've learned from Andrew Tracy's. But I think the time is now that we should try and ask, why did Nketiah think the way he did? He thought the way he did because what was on offer was not solving a particular problem. And that problem was, much as we talk about African music, we were not getting to the nub of it. We were not able to speak the same language in the classroom and in the villages where this music happens. So that for me is a problem. If you come with all your degrees and whatnot and go into the village and you are unable to join when they perform, that means something is wrong. You've been miseducated. Yeah. So coming back to I think you started it. Let me move it to what then can we do with this African music? The study of African music. We're supposed to start interfacing with artificial intelligence, right? Gone are the days when I would need a degree from Univen, for instance, for me to gain employment. When I get into my studio, there are better guitar samples, better recorded this and that. I can even call a doctor and I record him being in Nigeria. He plays better than me. So there's no need for me really to study in order to be employed somewhere. So I should study so that I'm able to bring together these samples and make something new out of it, right? It's like we had a conference last week about intellectual property. Then they will say, but you can't take music from the village. And I was saying, no, but African music shouldn't be looked at in that manner. It's an inheritance. It's my inheritance. The music that plays in the village has my fingerprint on it because I'm from that place. That's why I speak the language that I speak. So I somehow have a license to use that music to fend for myself. Now, if I were to compose an orchestra, for instance, if you listen keenly, you'll be able to hear that the person who composed this might be coming from a particular village in Nigeria. Because of I'm aware, I've studied the the nuances of the music where I come from. So I'm able then to translate it unapologetically to a new medium. So we should be able to be so comfortable with understanding all the philosophical principles of African music so that we can even put it in pop, put it in rock, put it in jazz, convert it to AI, and then it must still carry the weight of being African music. So who's going to do that? An ethnomusicologist can do it, but an African musicologist can. So all I'm saying is that let us go and try and understand the music where it is. And in doing that, we also understand the musicians who play it so that we move them along out of poverty, and then we share what we've got with them to the world. It's a different way of looking at it. I don't like the fact that you will call me a professor, then I'll come to the village and I'll be the one who speaks. And then thereafter I publish a paper, then off I go, or I take the music I recorded in big studios and I make money. So we need to look at music differently, to say this is the music that these people use for their political expediency or for their healing. So if I take it away, let me uplift them as well, so that they have other resources, or I would even use them in a university context and employ them without them having the so-called qualifications, because they know what they're doing. So, but then it's my responsibility to affirm them, to affirm the music, to affirm the philosophies. It's my responsibility to convince everyone else that the philosophies that are in this music actually do apply. If we understand how a traditional ensemble, I hate the word traditional, but I'll use it to refer to the organic ensembles that operate at all. If we study how that entity functions, maybe we would have a system, a governance system that all African states can adopt. But who's able to get into the music and try and understand what this music says? You know, in my language, when they want to dethrone a king, they sing. So perhaps if we can introduce those elements into the modern day African governance system, would have contributed. But we are not going to reach that level if we just relegate the study of African music just for me to be a professor. Yeah, we must study it and get into the secrets it holds for us. Why was it so important that they kept performing it? And then if we can't answer that question, we haven't arrived yet.
Wow. Thank you so much, Prof. I think, well, this is just the opening. Now, our friends, colleagues, professors, doctors, the platform is open now. Please kindly raise your hand and use the mic. Then you are welcome to ask your question and, an engaged professor, or let's advance the conversation. I noticed there is one note here from Sheyi Ajibade. Perhaps that will be the first one. I don't know. Sheyi Alpha, would you like to use the mic? Like we say in Nigeria.
Yeah, I actually don't know if my microphone is working very much, bro, because I'm in a hotel where the Wi-Fi is not very good. But can you hear me?
Yes, you are
Yes.
very
So
loud and clear.
let's just. Yeah, I've already written it. Maybe you can just help me read it. So I don't think I have a very clear Wi-Fi here, so I try not
Okay,
to talk.
that's fine.
Maybe I'll talk after that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So while I raise Shei's question notes, kindly raise your hand so we can just find a way to navigate it. So thanks so much. Hello, Prof. I'm reading Shei's work now. Shei's note now. Thank you, Prof, for your introduction to this topic. I would like to ask what your theoretical or practical suggestions would be to understand African musicology, and how your suggestions of ethno-theory does not create a sense of marginalization within the scope of the musicologies or within music and research generally. What models do you suggest for an Afrocentric approach? What are the boundaries? How can we extend these ethno-theories across the complex African continent? I was also intrigued by the concept of solving problems. How do we approach this without duplicating the idea of what applied ethnomusicology stands for? I apologize. I had several questions, sir. Thank you again, Prof. Mapaya.
Yes, I did see them coming, but let's start with the one on whether we move from ethno theory. I would say let's move from grounded theory. I'll tell you why. We are busy trying to what's the term? We are busy trying to argue that Yoruba, for instance, it's not just the language, or it's not just a. We are trying to argue that it is a philosophical position. It's a worldview that houses several philosophical understandings. So we want to be open. We don't want to impose theories that we carry in our bags as we get into the village. We want to arrive at the village and say, okay, in this village, how do you see this? And then from there, I think at the back, obviously, we're using the readings that we've had, then we try to match what we hear with the structures that we may have had. But we try to run away from coming with theories that are already packaged by academy. So we want to say, okay, let's go into the village and see and hear what they do and what they say. Because if we go there with theories, we are going to try and package what they do into these theories. And I think by so doing, we'll be missing quite a lot, which is why practical ethnomusicology would not go far enough, because it's already packaged, it's already expecting a particular kind of conversation. For us, I think that is the limiting. We played with the ordinary language philosophy, a philosophy where we went into the village and then we asked them, and then we tried to listen to how they express an idea and use that language to sort of craft an understanding, which we hope at some point we'll be able to propagate it as a theory. If it's prevalent enough across a wider area, then we can then put it forward as a theory. For now, as I said in the beginning, we are trying to remove ourselves from what we've learned in the classroom. We go into the village and try to learn anew. But then we'll be using our privilege, which is what I call a privilege, that we are scholars, to now act as agents of empowerment, agents of probing, of making people feel that they have something to give, so that they give. Quite often, they do have something to say, but they can't say it because they think I'm more educated than them. You see, I'm just going very broad about a very clinical question. I hope in my answer you are able to locate an answer to a specific question you're asking. If not, you can focus on it so that I zoom on to it. But I just try to be broad. Then the question is, at what point are we going to then start theorizing? I think Dr. Ayorinde is aware that something is brewing, and then it's going to link nicely with what he's already doing, where we'll be in the same room and then perhaps agree away from ethnomusicology, away from the theories that are there, to say, no, this is what we found, this is what is happening, what do we do about it? We can then go and look into his archives and see what have they been doing. But eventually we must all agree as Africans that we saying African musicology is this kind of a thing, and then these are the kind of theories that we think are emerging. We cannot impose them. One defining factor of African musicology's relevance is that when you go to your village, the village people must be glad that you are there. They must jubilate because you are there, because they know you'll be talking to them, about their problems, and not just talking, you will be empowering them as well. It would be interesting if you go to France, you take the entire troop with you, or at least their leader, make them part of this journey, make them part of this knowledge that we're trying to make.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Yeah.
Yes.
Dear friends and colleagues, you can use your mic. Perhaps you have questions or need clarifications on some of the points Prof has laid down. So you are welcome to do that, please. I noticed Mr. Gani Kale sent a note. Mr. Kolawole Gani Kale, do you want to use your mic? Would you like to use the mic, please? Please, you're welcome to do that. So please.
Okay, maybe let me ask a question to our colleagues. Would they find reason to study what Davido is doing as musicologists?
That's an interesting question. Yes, I think people should understand, if you should be able to respond to that.
Okay. I see. Is it Professor Omotosho? Prof? Would you study what Davido is doing?
Well, I think okay, please carry on.
Yeah, I think this idea of African musicology is old, but we've been skating around it. We didn't want to confront it head on. And we are proposing that perhaps the time is now so that we can conduct studies really and see how we can use it for our practical purposes. I see even in gospel, you see the gospel music is what it is today because of heavy organic infusion of African sensibilities in it.
Yeah.
But if we sat down and study why was it possible and why was it necessary? Why couldn't we just sing the hymns as we know them? Even when we sing the hymn, why do they come out the way they do? That is a question that African musicologists need to answer.
Wow. Thanks so much, Prof. Well, friends, you are welcome to ask questions. You've heard Prof. He had laid it down for us. And what do you think? Are there areas you really want us to focus on or you want Prof to explore? Please, you are welcome to do that. Please just raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask a question. Thank you so much.
Hello. My name is Kiroi Amon. Thank you, Prof, for this very, very, very insightful discussion this afternoon. I'm calling in from Kenya, and I must admit Professor Mapaya is my supervisor, so I'm proud of him, and I'm so happy to actually be here and listen to him advance this discourse. Maybe perhaps here in Kenya, there is an aspect of what I call it authenticity that has kept African music not evolving. So we keep hearing of that word called authenticity. That therefore means that traditional African instrument that was there in the 50s must be kept that way and remain that way. God knows until when Jesus come back, we're still, chasing animals, killing animals, having the skin there. I'm wondering in this discourse, how do we get out of, authenticity, that word of authenticity, and get to make our African instruments to also, move forward, not static, because culture in itself is dynamic. With the AI revolution, I'm sure in the next couple of years to come, we are afraid that this instrument will totally be extinct if we don't think. So I don't know, how do we put it within your discourse, Prof, so that these instruments then continue to be there and continue to serve us as African and continue to advance this new way of looking at the African music. Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you. Okay, Ayorinde, are you mediating, or do you want us to just interact?
Oh, well, that's an interesting one, which has always been the elephant in the room. We have different perspectives when it comes to this African musicology, African music, what approach, what process must be taken. People have different approach, and I must be sincere. No one is wrong in this case. There is no wrong answer, and I also don't think there is no perfect answer. But the question the one you just asked, I think it's an interesting one, a critical one for that matter, which is quite important today, 21st century. Earlier you asked, are people in Nigeria who studies music or doing ethnomusicology or ethnomusicology, are they studying Davido? This is that question in a different way now. So it's taking us to an interesting space that I don't want to call what it is right now, but I'll wait for those who owns that. I will wait for those who want to do it just to open it for us, because my business here is just to help the conversation going on. It's not, my business is not so much of talking. We have people who can help us navigate this space today. And I'm happy for that question. So, we have Mr. Kolawole, right? Yes. Okay, we have to find. Let's take Mr. Kolawole, then we'll go for Mr. Joshua David. Then please kindly raise your hand in case you want to say anything so we can make a count and just follow the order as soon as possible. Thank you so much. Mr. Kolawole, please, you have the platform.
Okay.
All right. Yes, I'm sorry. I just have to quickly come into a space where I can do this contribution. I am shuttling between two meetings at the moment, and I really can't talk more. So I'm going to make it very brief and run back while I listening with the headphone. Well, Professor Mapaya, I would just want to say thank you very much for your courageous critique of the current state of African musicology. Your call for authentic decolonization strikes at the very heart of the contradiction that many of us grapple with in our academic and artistic practice. I particularly resonate with your interrogation on the paradoxical role African scholars often play. We become gatekeeper of Eurocentric legitimacy while claiming to champion indigenous thought. The academia platform sent me a notification of one Professor Olakwe, one of his writings yesterday, and I nearly wept while reading it. I had to quickly draft a response to send back to academia because it's just so much injustice to our essence and our music culture. Well, yes. I would like to affirm your position by adding that this crisis is not merely academic; it is existential.
Yes.
We are witnessing the slow erasure of historic tradition, of instrument ontologies and performance systems that predates colonial contact. Yet, our institutions continue to valorize Western theoretical framework as the gold standard for knowledge production.
Yes.
I think the time has come, as you have powerfully argued or presented, in a very gentle way, to reclaim. The time has come to reclaim authorship, not just of our music, but of the very paradise through which we understand and transmit it, our music.
Yes.
My contribution then is to echo your call for a radical epistemic shift and to propose that this shift must also involve institutional disobedience. We need curriculum rebellion. We need methodological subversion and the unapologetic elevation of indigenous knowledge system as primary, not auxiliary. I mean, let us not merely decolonize content, but let us re-indigenize context. Thank you very much, sir, for galvanizing this critical. Wow. I'd like to say more, but I have to. I'm shortly between 2 minutes. I'm really sorry about that, but I really thank you very much for this talk. God bless.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gani Khaled. Thank you so much. Yeah. Can we have okay, Prof, let's take 3, 4, then you respond to everything at the same time. Is that okay?
Let me respond to Prof.
Okay.
Because Prof actually put it in uncertain terms what we need to do, and I would want to hook up with him so that we can take the discussion further, because the way he put it across, that's exactly what needs to happen. And thank you so much, Prof. Doctor, you share Prof's details with me so that we can
definitely. I would do that. Thank you. I will do that. Definitely, I will do that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So let us take Joshua David. Let's have you, please.
All right. Good day to everybody, and thank you so much, Prof, for articulating these ideas clearly. I hope that you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I'm always on the, to a very large extent, on the sort of divide when we have these conversations. And so I just want to throw a few ideas and then ask that you please, help us expand and expound these things. The first thing that comes to my mind every time I hear the idea of African music is to ask myself, what exactly are we talking about? And why I ask that question is because we have perpetually continued to describe this concept of African music as if it were unitary across board. And so my sort of response, being born in Nigeria, lived all my life in Lagos, every time I hear African music, I ask myself, what exactly is this term trying to address? Are we speaking to the gospel music we grew up listening to? Are we speaking to the confluence of the average Lagos Christian home, where at the same time you're listening to Don Moen, you're listening to Women of Faith, at the same time you're listening to Ayorinde from the Kerubu and Seraphim setting, at the same time there is Sonny Ade playing at the Owambe settings. I grapple with the idea of what these, and I think somebody used the word authenticity. I try to run away from that term, but I grapple with the word, with the idea of African music. Now, you have described speaking on the terms of what the villagers, the people who actually perform this music, speaking on their terms. But the question is, isn't that in itself an ideological shift? What exactly are the terms that we as Africans use in dictating what we call our music? How do we dictate that music in such a way that it doesn't put us as Africans in a space where we are perpetually on the defending side? Because what has happened over the years is that even our scholarship has continually tried to defend a unitary idea that it seems like even those of us as scholars or our forebears, let me say, as scholars, have not clearly articulated for us. So we're continually trying to say African music has this concept, African music belongs in this way, but I always grapple with this idea, and I ask myself, is it less of African music if a person, like you asked, rightly so, that would we study Davido? My question is Davido authentically African, or has Davido been able to walk in a liminal space, what Homi Baba would call this the third space? Has Davido been able to navigate a third space, or is Davido an authentic, again, I don't like the word, an authentic description of what Africa should be? These are the questions that come to my mind when I hear this idea of African music and a general conception of it. Dr. Ayorinde talks about not wanting to mention the word. I think I will. Aren't we supposed to be thinking of Africa within a global context? Because now you've mentioned AI. AI is not necessarily domiciled within a particular space. So aren't you supposed to be thinking of Africa within this broader layout as opposed to an Africa that is dictated from a very unclear space where we keep saying African music means such a thing, and that if we travel around the continent, that term in itself can mean different things to different people. So this is me crying for help, sir. Can we break this thing down so that for once we're able to articulate that which we mean when we say African music? Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sorry. Can I respond, please? Can I just respond?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Wow. This is very, very interesting, and I feel so so much emotion as I listen to your questions and the passion with which you present it. You see, it exposes one of the deepest picture in how African music is perceived, how it is labeled. So, the face African music is often wielded as a homogenizing umbrella that flattens the rich polarity of the continent's sonic culture. You see, your emotion comes from the damage that has already been done by colonialism.
Yes.
I understand you perfectly, and I know exactly where you're coming from. I don't condemn you for it, but let me just listen to this. Ironically, the term African music is rarely applied to our indigenous traditions with the same legitimacy as it is commodified forms like as it is to Afrobeat and gospel that you mentioned. That's it. That's another issue entirely. But when we ask what is African music, we must immediately respond with another question, my brother. I mean, who is doing the naming and for whose benefit?
Yes.
If African music is only recognizable when it mimics Western harmonic structure, the song forms, or the commercial aesthetics, then we are not defining African music. I'm sorry to say that they ought to really be. We are defining African mimicry. African music in its truest and most complex sense is not a genre. Please, it is a world of epistemologies expressed through sound. It includes ritual drumming system, griotic lineages, praise poetry, masking ceremonies, sonic cosmologies, encoded in indigenous instruments, in tonalities shaped by language and movement system. It is inseparable from rhythm. These are not just styles, they are ways of knowing. I mean, genres like Afrobeats and gospel and the Sonia days and the Osita days of this world can be part of the African musical landscape, but they are not the definition of African music. To treat them as such is to ignore the deeper, older, more foundational musical tradition that continue to exist outside the commercial frame. We need better terminology, perhaps drawn from within African languages and systems that define music, not just as entertainment or product, but as life force, communication, as ritual, as healing, or philosophy. We should begin to privilege endogenous taxonomies rather than recycling colonial era labels that continue to marginalize the true intellectual breadth of our musical heritage. I think this is where your cry comes from, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think Prof has just summed it up. I'm not sure whether you still need anything, Doc.
Oh, well,
I think.
Okay, please carry on, please.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna respond this way. That the response as to it being a sort of an epistemic encapsulation of multiple things at the same time that could then be trickled down to sound, to ritual, to dance, to that idea in itself goes back to the point I was driving at by asking this question. So if African music is then and this epistemic knowledge system that can be expressed through multiple genres or stylistic differences, if that is what we are referring to, then I think that the premise of this conversation that African music should be defined from a particular place, then at that point needs to be sort of rethought. Now why I'm saying that is because if we are asking that who is doing the defining, then we place it at the pedestal that makes it open to who is constituted as African. And who is African is a question that we cannot answer by ourselves. We can only answer that question by the people identifying as African. So now, the question of who is African, it can only be answered. We, as scholars, can determine who is African. It is Africans, whoever they are. Whoever they are. Now we are sort of going back to the eras of the Georgina bonds, when they begin to talk about ontological differences. So who is African now is now determined by the people who identify as African. Now the question is, if a person who is performing operatic music defines himself as African, does the fact that that person is performing whatever with the violin, with the orchestra, if that person identifies as African within the conceptions of an African space, are we do we now redefine that and say, because to be speaking from two sides of the mouth, to say it is both a general epistemological definition, and then on the other hand we say it must be defined by the people who claim to be African. So Prof. Mapaya, please help us just untangle this knot, because again we always come back here, and that's why I'm asking this question. We always come back here, we tie the knot and say Africa must be defined on African terms. But the question is, when an African who doesn't suit our sensibility of what an African should be defines Africa, we say no, that's not Africa. Africa is another type. So where do we how do we clearly say this is what Africa should be based on this definition? And then it then becomes the platform from which we build up every other thing we've talked about: genres, rituals, artistic definitions, experimentations. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Thank you. Now, I want to simplify it and then just ask a simple question. If you were to take a flight and go to, let's say, Kenya, for instance, and you are at the airport, you want assistance, you see people walking around, and then they speak to you in a native language, would you be able to tell if the language is African, some kind of an African language, or would you be confused? Would you be saying, no, I can't trust what they say their language is because they speak that language? So African music for me, as Prof said, it's not necessarily what you hear, it's everything else that goes underneath that makes it African music. I'm not sure if I make any sense. The ritualistic component, the spiritual connection, the intellectualization of it all, if it is conceived and if it is if it manifests from the African mind, it qualifies as African music. So the question is, does it have to be authentic? I don't think so. I don't think we should police it. But what our guard against is that is for us, if we resist unity, if we resist that we cannot speak as Africans about African music, then we are defeated from the onset. This hullabaloo of African solutions for African problems would be pie in the sky. I think even if we are not agreed on this aspect, let's fake it and see if we can't fake it enough for it to be real. Let's assume there is an entity called African music. I think I said it earlier on that our task is for us to be in a room and engage in this kind of discussions and come out with a working definition and thereafter refine it and see if it can be used to address everything else that the African people want in the musical space. I don't think we should start at dismantling it altogether. I'll appeal that let's fake that there is African music. I believe there is. Like I'll tell you when you speak Yoruba that, oh, I don't understand it, but you're speaking beautiful African music. And I go to Zululand, they speak, you're able to say, no, this is not European, it's African. So there is something there. There is a thread that we need to respect. That's where I'll leave it. Thank you so much. Thank you for very high intellectual debate.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Prof. That is what
Thank you, sir.
yes, that is the Organ House platform for you. We thank you so much. Yeah. So let's go, Professor. We have Professor Adeolo Kwade. Then we go to we have many hands now. Professor Kwade, we have Kadukpe, then we have Dr. Luranti, we have Tulani Zulu. Then who else is there? Yeah, let's take it in that order. Professor Kwade, Kadukpe.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Professor Mapaya, Dr. Ayorinde, Organ House, everybody, thank you. And I think this one is another stimulating one for all of us. Actually, the Joshua David's contribution, thank you. My very good friend who has spoken, I must acknowledge him very well from that pastor. That's Professor Kolawole Gadikale there. Just recently, both of us got ourselves engaged in a very good discourse. And I was saying that one of the things I've had a bit of talking about is that united we fall, divided we stand. Yes, and I said that united we fall, divided we stand. I had a grace of talking about that theme some time ago at the University of Benin. As long as we continue thinking Western, we have problem of what is African music. I think that is where the problem comes from. If we don't open our mind, if we close our mind and we want to use Western yardstick to measure everything that comes to our table, the table of art, we have problems. Professor Mapaya said it that well. He knows that there is African music. As long as we have the Homo sapiens everywhere, but in different climate, there will be different music. There's convention. There's identity. And for those who are familiar with ISME and the ISME Associated Africa, is called PASME, Pan-African Society for Musical Arts Education. This was the part that gave back to that name. It wasn't musical arts education. It was something that Society for Music Education. It was in Zambia. I hope I get my history right now.
Yeah.
That thank you. The likes of Mekizewi, Professor Mapaya, just acknowledged when it started, fought it that we do not have music education in Nigeria. And this is for Africans, African people. It cannot be musical. It should be musical arts education. It was a battle that all big guys in our discipline, both white, brown, color, yellow, everybody stood down, sat down, discussed and discussed and discussed. And at the end of the day, say, okay, this thing cannot be musical. This is for Africa. In the first, let me ask Professor Mapaya, what is music in Kenya? What is music, Dr. Ayorinde, in Nigeria? What's the equivalent word for music? Joshua, what is music? Ganikale, what is music? Equivalent word in Yoruba language, or in Igbo language, or in Hausa language, or in Swahili, or in Luo. We need to ask ourselves. That was where the debate started from. That as long as we use that Western definition to look at things that are available here. And as Agawu said, he said the fact that you don't have the equivalent meaning of it does not mean that the concept is absent. No. So the musical arts encapsulates everything we talk about music. Myself and Dr. Ayorinde, we are discussing this issue, similar thing like that. I said, okay, look here. Composition that we talk of African culture, we talk almost for 1 hour. I saw Dr. Roti on this issue. And I said, as long as you don't have parallels in your harmony, for me, it is not African. And thank God, we have even gone beyond that era. Professor Agu, if you are writing anything for him, he wants to, because that is what makes it African. Professor Akiyuba was talking about creative ethnomusicology, later creative musicology. Now let us go to the market. Let us go to the market square. Let us go to the village square and see what they are doing there. And let us write our composition along that line. Harmonies in seconds. You find it in Southwest Ife. So if somebody is writing that one, and you are the teacher, you are not trying to say, oh, this is wrong. Oh, this is wrong. This is octave. Oh, no, this is hidden octave here. Oh, this is a crossing of part. You are still doing it the way they do it in their own climb, and they brought it to us. And that is good. In Malaysia, we are arguing. Meki was informed from. Meki said, Africans are not selfish. We have learned enough of Western music. We can discuss it. We can write it. We can perform it. Come and learn our own. And let us tell you, this is how we do it. We will not use those rules to guide our own. Because when you hear it on stage, it is sweet, it is good. If you look at it on paper, you cannot access it on paper. Let's go to the stage and listen to it very well. Because this is what I got from the village. You know, I want the indigenous people, this is how they do it. And this is how it should sound. So that's why I said that united we fall, divided we stand. If you just look at this, how it is done in our own area, and this is what we are bringing to the stage. I was watching, if you have watched Lagbaja music, when they used violins and all those things, those guys in the video wore suits to accompany him. And the guy that they said, no, remove the suit. And they gave it to them. And they were wearing indigenous dresses, all of them playing, talking, doing all those things that we will do. We are not saying we should abandon what we have learned. That's the convention. We are not saying that. But where's our identity?
Yeah.
So I thought Professor Mapaya, the way he has spoken well, and he mentioned something which I also used here, that ours is organic. It's organic. If you are talking of music therapy, look at the therapeutic effect of some of our drums. Where they start from. We skin live animals to do it, not synthetic animals. I will not want to go too deep into that so that we don't get into another strong debate that will not end today and become an endless genealogy. So thank you for allowing me, Organ House. Thank you. We are still here. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Mr. Kadukwe, then we'll come back to Dr. Laurenti, then we'll go to is Zulu? Wait. Yeah, let's go.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayorinde. I must say that Professor Mapaya is my supervisor and I am his disciple. The idea that Professor is talking about regarding Afrikan musicology, but I can say that it is reflecting also in my PhD study. Because now the question that came to me the first time was, okay, so when you finish studying this music of your local area in Nigeria, so what about it? So now where we drove the discourse to was now that, okay, so after you can't be studying like everyone has been studying. There has to be a part of it that that speaks to current issues, how this music can address current issues in our society.
Yeah. And
that is my second objective. No, my third objective in that study. And of course, I and Professor Mapaya too, we are working on, for example, the music of Lagbaja, how is one of his tracks that talks about vernacular languages. So we are also exploring that within the context of development in African society, particularly Yoruba society. And now, so I would like to ask a question. But before that, Prof, you asked a question the other time about studying Davido. I would like to tell you that right now I'm conducting a study for a book chapter on the music of Davido, how it in the context of borderless cultural transfer. So now to my question. We have been talking about African music, and someone made the comment about studying, making Western music as the basis for the study of African music. Now I want to ask a question about music notation and instrumental technology. Right now, we say, okay, we should look at African music from the lens of Africa. How do we standardize music in Africa to an extent that we can teach someone to write music in the African way in Venda? Teach the same person to write music that same way in Kaparak in Kenya. Teach the same person to write in Martintop University in Nigeria. And then again, our instruments, how do we work so that those instruments, by the time we start writing for them, we can write and then someone is playing the exact pitch anywhere that instrument is being played. So these are two questions I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Prof, do you want to respond to that, or we get more questions, then you can address everything together?
Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Laurent, can we have you, sir?
Thank you very much. Thank you, for Professor Mapaya. Thank you again, House, for this very interesting topic. I have a lot to say, but I'll start by asking a question. If I, as an African, I write a fugue, a full-fledged Baroque fugue, okay? And I take my name off it, of that score, and I throw it into the public space, in the global market. Would anyone be able to recognize the work as an African music? Would it be considered African music? Or if I write a music based on serialism, okay? And my series is based on an approximation of what the talking drum can do, and I throw it out into the music space there. Is it African? Am I writing African music? You see, basically, what we're grappling with here is with the criteria with which to define African music. And simply put, the question is it going to be defined based on who is writing or what is being written? Is it the content or the person writing it? You see, on a larger scale, the problem with Africa is so simple. We are operating within the conflict of, within a pool of conflicting value systems.
Yeah.
That's the problem of Africa. It goes beyond music.
Yes.
Okay? Africa, in different parts of Africa, we have a tradition and concept of what marriage is. Okay? Now we are confused as to what marriage is because of one thing, our colonial experience.
Yeah.
What did colonial experience bring for us? What did it bring to us? Value system conflict. Who are we? Against who the colonial masters say we should be. Okay? Now, the Africa today is now suffering from a mix of both inferiority and superiority complexes. There's the aspiration to want to belong, to want to be, exist according to everything thrown to us through our colonial masters, and we keep our eyes on them. We don't even want to live in Africa. We want to live elsewhere according to the dictates. We want to create music that will even appeal to them, not even to Africa. So there's this conflict. These are the themes. And as Professor Kwade said, where is our identity within this mix? Where is who are we? So if we really want to understand what African music is, do you want to understand it from what existed pre-colonial Africa, or where we are right now, which is a mixture of all influences, intercultural influences? There is the school of thought that, look, colonization has changed the landscape of Africa. We are who we are. We are neither black nor white. Let's just accept the fact that we are confused human beings and let that be the status quo. That is what a lot of African voices, all these grammar musicologists are blowing abroad, use of identity, beauty of authenticity. That is what they are saying. That look, we are confused. We don't have a sense to hold on to our own core value system. This hybrid thing, let us continue it. But the question or the issue that is so clear to some of us who are composers and theorists is that, look, whatever you create out of that system, take out your name, take out your Africanness or whatever, like, throw it into the global space. What is going to be said about it? It's going to be all about content at the end of the day. Now, the issue we now have is that a lot of musicologists, ethnomusicologists, African ethnomusicologists, they've got into this junction of, let us think about how do we define African music? What is it? They have said so many things, but this generation will refuse. You see, there's something they've been saying consistently, that for it to be African, you have to go back to pre-colonial Africa. You see, if you have a mixture, you put some sort of, you put water in here, and then you put another substance to mix with water. It depends on the quantities. That's what will determine what is in there. This thing called Africa, we have so much of westernization and colonial value system in it that the impact of water, the water that should be in it, is just out of it, that we can't think of it as Africa. So for us to really get down to this, we need to go back, and very simple things they've told us to do. Akiba said, look, if you want to really write something that will go out there and have the rubber stamp of Africa, start thinking of how to use African instruments. And the truth of the matter is, where is it coming from? It's coming from a compositional angle. Because when you want to compose for the piano, you can't compose from beyond the 82 keys, go beyond equal temperament. That's the framework. It's theoretical. Whatever you're going to write is going to be Western. Don't fool yourself. So if we are thinking of things that will go out there, we need to go deeper. Nketia said it, that if we want to think African, we have to rethink everything from phrase to cadences, and we have the answers in systems that existed before before colonization. But a lot of modern day musicologists say, if you want to reinvent the wheel, we can't go back to that. Now look at it. Why is Africa what it is in terms of governance? Because they sold the concept of democracy to us, and that's why we're still confused. Democracy is alien to us, and that's why we have no identity in terms of governance. It's the same thing with music, because we just want to latch on to global relevance. We want to say, yes, I can write SATB too, and you can take it to St. Paul's Cathedral. You know, so we need to go rethink the content of our trade. When I was asking these questions on what African music should be, I mean, that was the whole thrust of my own research. And look, let's start studying African traditional to what you are looking for. But I figured it out eventually. And when I first started studying it, I wanted to study Herbert Ogunde. And he said, no, Herbert Ogunde was a city man. Just like Joshua David is a city man. He grew up in Lagos. That you can't get the essence of Africa growing up in Lagos. So he said, go and study Oladele, who was a village man. I didn't stop there. I did a comparative analysis of their output. Oladele, his work latched on purely theoretically to the principles of Dundu music. You can't listen to his opera, take his name out of that opera, put it in the global market, and nobody will tell you, there's nobody will tell you that this is a Western work. They will tell you this is African. Yeah. Go to Herbert Ogunde, is a mixture of, is a Davido, a mixture of this and that. So if we are really serious about defining African music, we should define it from the point of the content, not who is writing. After all, Western art music, it doesn't matter who is writing it. You can be Chinese, you can be Kenyan, but when you write within the context of Western African music and Western art music, everybody knows, because the definition is not based on who is writing. The definition is based on the content, what is written, the theory. So until we get to the point that you can write a music, I mean, we can construct our African music theoretically such that a Japanese can study that theory and recreate it. We don't have any identity. There must be a theoretical definition that anybody can relate to. Yeah. Independent of where they are, well, I mean, where they come from. And the key to that theoretical framework lies in traditional Africa. And that is why two important people, Yuba and Nketia, they keep saying, go to the field, go to the village people, go to the village professors. There's wisdom in what they're saying. I went to the village. I went to study to do music, and the thing that struck me immediately was the structure, the theory. Yeah. And I discovered that this is what we are looking for, that will identify us, but we don't know it. Yeah. And then we are just speaking grammar and grammar and grammar. Let me round up by saying this. I've said it so many times. If you say a house built according to Victorian architecture or Edwardian architecture, okay? And then you as an African, you buy such a house, then you put, raffia mats, all African stuff, ornaments inside it, you have not changed that house. That house is no longer, is not African, it's still Edwardian. As long as that structure is there, it's still Victorian. You might live inside it as an African, but it doesn't change it. For you to change it, you have to pull that structure down and create something else. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ross. Thank you. Prof, do you want to respond to this, or we move on to another one more question, then you respond, or if you want, or how do you do it?
Yeah. For me, I think this discussion signals it's a sign of the time. And I think even this technology is making it possible now for us to be in conversation. What Prof has just said, we just need to destroy the house and then go into the village and start reconstructing it again. And that way, for me, I think if we can, let me speak for myself. If for the remaining days of my life, I can be able to do exactly what Prof is saying, I can be able to demolish this thing that is in front of me. And then I can go back to the village and learn anew. I would have accomplished what I need to say. But then we still have an advantage in the sense that we've got, well, a system of thinking that we've learned from the other side. We could then use that system to theorize about what we find in the villages. We shouldn't shy away from the fact that we are no longer the same. We've gone through these education systems, but we have to be deliberate as to what is it we carry out of it and use for our advantage. Now, I think this is one classic example where African scholars, in their mastery, whatever field or genre we are, we could be in the same house. I think the common denominator is that we would understand what African music is without even having to define it. And then our task then is to say, okay, if this group were to perish today, what are we leaving for the next generation of scholars? If we can answer that question and do something about it, I think we would have achieved our generational mission.
Wow. Thank you so much, bro. Can we have Tulani Zulu, please?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to first start by saying thank you for this platform. It has made it easier for us as Africans to bring together our minds and start solving our challenges, like the one we are tackling right now. I've been listening, and my understanding concerning Prof. Mapaya's argument, it has to do with the African music, or how we perceive African music and its use. His argument, from my point of view, is how do we address issues around musicology so that our music can be able to play its role. It can start solving our problems, which to me means as Africans, we could be fortunate in the position we find ourselves, compared to maybe comparison will not be a right way to take, but then we could be in a position where we use music to solve our problems. Now, again, I'm not going to really focus much on the content of our conversation today, but to just ask one question, because for me, all the back and forth and the robust debate that we are having, I find it quite healthy, although we might not be able to come up with quite solutions today at this point. But what for me is important is how do we maintain the relevance of our argument across generations to come? Because for me, what we are facing against, it's a phenomenon that we cannot really maybe have answers to at this present moment. But I will use the word fashionable. How do we keep this argument fashionable going forward? Because I'm using that word because in our midst, there are colleagues, fellow brothers and sisters who are not in the academic space. And the question, I thought Prof. Mapaya just said something in his previous statement that we collapse everything and then start afresh. But for me, that will be the one would say, what will be the practical solution? How do we collapse everything and then start afresh and go back to fetch the organic information to make our course relevant? Again, I'm going to rephrase my question is, how do we keep our argument relevant going forward? Or how do we keep it fashionable going forward? We might not be visible currently, but like it or not, there are gatekeepings as far as this argument is, this phenomenon is concerned. And then even in the academic space, you can tell that there's resistance that is taking place. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Solani. Thank you so much for that one insightful contribution. Prof, do you want to respond to this quickly?
Yes, but I see Prof. Olurand want to come back.
Okay, Olurand, let's have you, sir.
Yeah, just quickly to Professor Solani. Whenever this thing comes up, people ask the question, "Oh, do we forget everything we have been doing? Do we collapse and start afresh? Do we forget that we know how to play the piano? Let's go and learn how to play African instruments." No, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about, go and check Western history. Take, for example, when Schoenberg, Berg, and Webern, when they crashed the established pitch control world, it didn't go out to announce that this is what we want to do. As a matter of fact, at the close of the century, from the late 1800s, there had already been tension. Things that were shaking the issue of tonality, tonal centricity, and in the hands of Debussy, all of them, they were already moving, whereas you still had people who went on to, the conventions of the back time, but these people were just doing the experimentation, and eventually, it first started with chromaticism, and that was pushed and pushed and pushed until Schoenberg, Berger, all of them, they started, that, okay, let us put away this thing. You get it? So, look, the firmament is so big for all the birds to fly. We can, as Africans, we can continue the pathway of we want to be relevant to our colonial masters. There's no problem with that. We can still be doing our Debussy, Mozart, everything, but for thinkers among ourselves, we must always think like Schoenberg and all of them that, look, we don't need to change the world. Let us do our research. Let us do our findings. This realization might come in 50 years' time, in 100 years' time. We don't need to collapse. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to speak the truth to ourselves that we have resources untapped or realized in the villages. And before those village professors die, let us document all these things. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Prof, do you want to say anything? You want not to respond to that?
Just to cap on what Prof said, we should count ourselves lucky because we are now sitting here sandwiched between the village professor, as he refers to them, and people who trained us. from Europe, maybe from the European school of thought. Instead of collapsing, I think we need just to take stock of our now found ability to express thought in a language that we all can understand. I'm not talking about English. I mean the way we take our arguments. We can take advantage of that and really sit around the table with the village professors and try and make sense of what they say and try and represent or help them represent what they are saying to a bigger audience. I think we have the capability to do that. And then I like the energy. I like the academic rigor that is on display here. If only we can harness it, put it in one channel, make sure that we speak as one. Because at the moment we've been publishing separately, and then our voice is not united before. I think Prof once said, I think we can take advantage of this moment where we can articulate, and then the kind of thinking that is on display, then I'm sure it filters down through to our students. But then we need to get to work and sit with these people and see if we can sit among ourselves and see if we can address this kind of questions. But for me, the definition is not that much of a problem, whether we call it African music or what. It shouldn't be our first problem. Let it be a problem of those who are worried that we are getting together. But ours, I think, let's get together and see what we do with the new acquired skills that we have as Africans. Can we then define a discipline that truly represents our inheritance? That's all I'm asking.
Thank you so much, Prof. And thanks so much for our able contributors, Dr. Laurenti, Joshua David, Professor Kwade, and everyone that has contributed today, Kadukwe, Tulani, and Wes, of course, our able Mr. Gani Kale, Joshua David, and everyone that has contributed. Sheyi, Ajibade, thank you so much. So it has been an interesting movement and a journey today, and I'm so excited, not only because we are discussing this same issue again, but because we approach it in a different way, and the responses came also in a different way. So I'm excited about that. This is not a new conversation. We need to acknowledge that. But the ways in which it has been engaged and explored today is a unique one. And like Professor said, we don't need to dismantle sometimes, or definition is not the case now. What we need is a form of engagement, that are also privileged, keeping it fashionable. That's what Professor said earlier. And I can see Mr. Korede reminded us of that reality. It's keeping it fashionable. If we go to the township or to the village and we bring the same material to the city, people are not going to accord it its value, because for them it's something belated, but it's not belated. Because it's not belated, that's why we're having this conversation. How do we engage Uhadibo, for instance, of South Africa with technology? How do we engage talking drum dundun in a way that AI can codify and making it more circulated? Yes, nobody's going to say it's not an African instrument anymore. So we need it's the same resources, but we need a kind of engagement that further validates keep these materials fashionable. That is what that's my own simple take on all this conversation we're having, Davido sings folk songs, of course. If you see some of Davido's songs, yeah. Recently, he just sampled one of our Nigerian old highlife musicians' work. That is the kind of fashionable people are talking about. Take this material, even the so-called art music we're talking about now. Of course, there are interesting arguments in that area. People saying it's not African, it's African. But that is a question for every one of us. And that's what we are going to discuss at the seminar, at the symposium in July. But the question here is ability to engage this indigenous material in a way that further privilege them, that give them more life, not close them. Yeah.
Yes.
So in sum, before closing, I like to remind us of our symposium in July. The conversation continues. And we've talking about African music, African musicology. What about this interesting phenomenon that has been around us for centuries now? Can we talk about African art music? Or some will say modern African art music. Now we have composers, we have choir masters who are writing in the language of European, who are keeping indigenous music fashionable within the tool of the European. Let's come and discuss, perform, listen, analyze, and explore this aspect of African music. Some might even say, oh, no, it's not African music. No, it's African music. But let's keep that for now. Let's come in July and engage this material. The space is still open. Please send in your presentation proposal. It could be an analytical work. It could be a lecture reciter. It could be a performance. You are welcome. It could be a paper. It could be a research work or historical materials you've been working on. We are looking forward to your work. We would like to engage with you. So we are open to everyone, and the symposium is free. Yeah, you can either join online or come down where it's happening at the organelles. We are happy to have some of the biggest voice in town, like those of Professor Mapaya today, the likes of Professor Kofi Agau and Bode Omojola, to lead us or to also engage us in this material. And also, we are going to engage them. They have been one of the proponents of this logic of African art music in Africa, or African music studies. So how do we engage these resources today, this material today? So that is a focus of our symposium in July. Please send in your abstract as soon as possible. Then lastly, I have in the chat box, I am sending in again the link to our YouTube channel. Please, the channel is for you. Kindly follow us, and this material will be made available also on that channel. So please, let's take advantage of these resources. That's our archive. That is how we are keeping the African discourse fashionable, through digital mediation, to document all these conversations. So anybody can come in the next 30 years to that page and make use of this conversation to expand the knowledge. Thank you so much. So Professor Mapaya, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution today. It's been an interesting one, and you have actually provided us with an interesting resources to think. This, of course, we've always been talking about African musicology in different ways, but you open us to it in a new way, particularly approaching it from your own story is quite, enchanting, or it's quite, accelerating, exciting in the ways in which you took us through your own training as an African musician, studying jazz, and from there entering into music research in the community internship, and now becoming the phenomenon that you have become today. Thank you so much, Prof, for opening us to your world and sharing this important worldview, important research in your own perspective with us. Thank you so much, Prof. We sincerely appreciate the effort and your contribution today. Also, I need to let everyone know that Professor Mapaya is one of our when I say critical fans, is an avid follower and a fan of the organelles, particularly our research project here and the kind of things we are doing. Professor Mapaya, thank you so much for the encouragement and being a fan of this initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, colleagues. I'm inspired. I've learned so much. They are senior professors in this, what do you call it, chat. Yeah, and I can only imagine what would happen if we were to say, let's come and let's put a book together and put all these ideas in that kind of a book. Maybe a conference. Maybe you want us to come to the organ house at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That will definitely help. We'll definitely get to that junction. So as soon as we cross the African art music now, then we'll go to that particular junction. And we'll definitely reach out to you when we are ready for that. Yeah.
Yes. Just my final word is that I'm humbled. I've learned so much, and thank you for the opportunity. You know, when you're sitting in your little corner, you think these ideas are, you think you are made, but you come to a forum like this, you find senior scholars who are so articulative, who put your ideas in ways you wish you were able to. And thank you so much, colleagues.
You're welcome, Prof.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much. And everyone, thank you. Kindly send in your presentation. We are looking out for you. We are waiting to see you. We can't wait to have you and to engage you. Thank you so much. For now, bye. See you next week.